All right, welcome everyone. This is our Boston.NET architecture group. We're meeting on October 15, 2025. And our topic tonight is using .NET Aspire eShop app to collect telemetry in OpenTelemetry. And Harry Kimball is here with us today. Really appreciate it. I know he's visiting the US. He's got some great stories here about his travels, but really appreciate him stopping by tonight and sharing some of his wisdom and understanding about some great this great product and other things that are happening here with it, and appreciate it. So Harry, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks again for joining and
Yeah,
for leading and teaching us tonight.
yeah, my pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you all for coming. And please, if you have any questions, please just stop me, ask anytime. We don't need to wait for the Q&A at the end, but we can do a Q&A at the end. Um, so let's get started. Let me share my screen. Oh, I don't have access. Here you go. Let's get all of these windows out of the way. So the topic that I wanted to talk to you about is using .NET Aspire, as you said, the eShop app to collect the telemetry in an OpenTelemetry backend. I, will be using New Relic as a backend for this, but whatever I'm sharing today is basically applicable to any other observability vendor that does support OpenTelemetry and OpenTelemetry line protocol. So this is 100% applicable. It's using the pure open standard, and that's what I'm about to share. I have a section on where I jump into like a live demo. I hope the demo codes are with me today to show you some real life example on how this could actually look like. First of all, who am I? My name is Harry Kimpel. As you can see from that picture that I put up there, I live in a small village in the southern part of Germany, in Bavaria, almost at the border of Austria. It's right where the Alps begin. So the picture that you see here is, at the right where the Alps begin. This is also my skiing area right here that you can see. I have been in software pretty much all my professional career. I started actually when I was 14. I saved some money. I did some work in parallel to going to school, and I bought my first computer, which was an Amiga 500 back then. Of course, we played a lot on that machine. I have two brothers, and we played quite a bit. But I also was very interested in the programming aspect, and I used Amiga Basic back then. There was the time when you had like magazines who printed source code, and I retyped it into the Amiga. And that was so fascinating for me that I can control and put instructions into the computer, and it did what I asked it to do. So later on, I wanted to learn everything about that. So I studied computer science at some point, and worked in software pretty much all my professional career, which is almost coming up on 30 years now. I started in the Microsoft developer ecosystem, and this is where I'm still very passionate about. So I, from Amiga Basic back then, my first job was, doing Visual Basic 3 and Visual Basic 4 development. I then went into C and C++, and I think the first time I used C# was in 2002. So one of the early versions of .NET. And I stick to that ecosystem quite a long time. And of course, you look into left and right and what's out there as well. But that was something that was really interesting to me. And I'm working for New Relic as a principal developer relations engineer, and since 2017, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a great company, and I really I'm lucky to be there. And as you can imagine from the background here, if I'm not in front of a computer, I like all things outdoors, hiking, biking, climbing, skiing, of course. The skiing season is hopefully about to start very soon. And that's what we in my family, I have 3 kids, we really enjoy doing in the winter. All right, so before I jump into the topic, one more, or basically 2 more things. I recently asked ChatGPT, and you may know that it has some memory functions. It remembers your prompts and your input and your background. So it asked it, based on what you know about me, draw a picture of what you think my current life looks like. And the response I got back was this here. Here's an illustration capturing your developer life, surrounded by the inspiring Bavarian Alps and so on and so forth. And the picture I got back was this here. And if you can see, and from the previous picture as well, and compare it, it looks very similar in the window, like the background there. And I thought this was amazing, what I got back here. And even the houses, they look very, Bavarian style, and stuff like that. And they throw, a desktop with a lot of monitors. My little daughter, she's 12. She then asked me, how does ChatGPT know that you have so many monitors at home? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's, guessing, or, that developers have many monitors. But what I also found interesting, that it even drew some observability dashboards on the screen here. And I thought this is just hilarious and a fun picture. And the second aspect is, I recently came in. I'm currently sitting here in New York, and came in from Boston. And funny enough, I actually studied at Boston University more than 26 years ago. And I just came back, went to the Metropolitan College there, and really enjoyed the time in Boston again. Anyways, for those who know a little bit about New Relic, New Relic is an all-in-one observability platform. And this is a busy screen, and we started in application performance monitoring. We do a lot of, end-to-end monitoring these days. And on the screen, I won't go through all of it, but I wanted to highlight a couple aspects here. The first one is, it basically, we support all different types of telemetry, metrics, events, logs, traces, or third-party telemetry. There's even APIs that you can use to ingest any kind of telemetry into the platform. So it's really open, and can handle a lot of different things, besides also OpenTelemetry, which I'll cover in a couple of minutes. The second aspect is, it's of course highly scalable. New Relic is a pure SaaS environment, so a SaaS platform that we provide. So we support the biggest enterprises in the world, and you can imagine it's a lot of data that they ingest into the platform. So we need to scale to their biggest days. And I guess Black Friday is coming up here in the US, so a lot of data that you need to handle, of course, for our customers to have visibility into what is happening in their environments. And the second aspect is, and this is really kind of unique with New Relic, we are out of the box handling an aspect called high cardinality. And what this actually means, I'll cover it in a second, but basically, if you have telemetry, if you have traces, metrics, or logs coming in, and you add in some custom attributes for these kinds of telemetry, you can add basically also custom attributes, like, for example, in a retail scenario, maybe like the product ID that your end user is putting into a cart, or the product category ID, or the product ID. And you can imagine this can be a lot of different dimensions and attributes that you'll add into the platform. And we really handle this really nicely, and without any friction. So that is one of the things that I wanted to quickly highlight. And second of all, we also have a very generous free tier. So if you want to experiment and use New Relic, you can do that. You can sign up for a New Relic account. It is, there's the free tier, includes 100 GB of ingest on a monthly basis, which is a lot of data that you can use. So if you want to have a look, you can easily create your own account and use it. Funny thing here on this screen, as you can imagine, this is my own domain, kmpl.fun, and I'm using this to use URL shorteners. We used to use bit.ly for that, but this got taken away from us. I guess it got too expensive at some point, so I deployed my own version of an URL shortener. And this is a nice tool that is also coming from Microsoft. This is a Microsoft Blazor web application. You can see the URL here on GitHub, Microsoft/AC URL shortener. I made a clone. I forked this repository, and because I wanted to add some QR code generation into it, I actually also made a PR into the repository. So this is what I'm using, and it's just a nice fun fact here. Anyways, so let's get into the topic. The talk is all around .NET Aspire, and for those who may not be familiar with what .NET Aspire is, it is really a cloud-ready stack for building observable, production-ready distributed applications. So Microsoft really tries to come up with like an approach on how to make it easy to get started with like distributed applications and multiple microservices, and really provide a nice and easy way to spin up these applications and show you a way of how you can orchestrate this entire distributed application in a nice developer-friendly way. It solves a couple issues that are focused around complexity. So if you have a lot of complex applications, maybe using a database and maybe some event-based systems like RabbitMQ or Redis databases, they make it usually easy, and .NET Aspire provides some really nice components here of how to get started in this and how to spin up your developer environment easily within. And get to this in a couple minutes. So the getting started aspect is really something that it focuses on. It provides a huge set of different choices when it comes to like databases. If you're using SQL Server or MySQL or Postgres, or whenever you use some event-based systems like Redis, RabbitMQ or Kafka. And so it provides, tries to provide this paved path of opinionated best practices that you can use in your environments to get up and running really quickly. And lastly, it always already comes with some predefined components that are ready to use. And again, I have a couple examples that I'm showing in the eShop app, but for Redis and RabbitMQ, for SQL databases, it comes already with some components that you can use and spin up as part of your application development lifecycle. So this is really nice to get started in your developer environment, but also making it easy for the deployment process into your Azure environment or other cloud services. There's some really nice concepts around also how to get from your dev and staging environment up until into production. So really a great way to build applications and in a cloud native distributed manner. And it also comes with some, like I mentioned, some opinionated ways on what it is you should do. Like, for example, if you have some, if your application that you're building makes some calls to some external HTTP services, it has some resiliency baked in and things like that. And it also comes with built-in observability. So OpenTelemetry is already baked into .NET Aspire, and it's easy to get started and up and running. Talking about OpenTelemetry, for those who may be not too familiar with that. So I'm, coming from New Relic, and we have kind of like pioneered in the space of application performance monitoring. So we started building these agents, these language agents for various kinds of languages, for .NET, of course, but also for Java, Ruby, Python, and so on. And we always focused on very lightweight, small, dedicated agents that don't provide like a huge overhead. But of course, the purpose for these .NET or for these agents from New Relic were to send the data into New Relic as an observability backend. And OpenTelemetry really tries to provide an open standard for capturing telemetry from various sources, from your applications, from your infrastructure, from other things that you can monitor in a vendor neutral fashion. It is actually a merger of two other projects, Open Tracing, which focused on the traces aspect, and Open Census on the metrics. And OpenTelemetry really combines all of the different telemetry signals, metrics, traces, and logs into a single standard. It has vendor agnostic APIs, libraries, integrations that you can use, and really standardizes the way to collect the data and serve the data. And it's really, in my opinion, this is the future of capturing telemetry. And basically all of the big vendors in the software space are invested heavily in this open source standard. So this is part of the CNCF Foundation, and all of the big players are contributing to this standard. We at New Relic as well. As you can imagine, we have a lot of experience in building agents and making sure that we capture telemetry in a good way. So we also contribute to this open standard very actively. Another thing that also comes with OpenTelemetry is this concept of this OpenTelemetry collector. And this is a really nice concept because it allows you to capture telemetry where it gets produced and where it gets where it occurs. So you can run this OpenTelemetry collector pipeline close to your environment that you're using. Maybe you're setting up a Kubernetes cluster and running your applications and microservices as part of your Kubernetes cluster. You can run this OpenTelemetry collector in this environment already to capture all of the telemetry from all of the different pods and containers. And again, it uses language agents to collect the data from the various sources. So if you have a .NET application, there's a .NET agent that you can use for Java, similarly for Ruby, Go, Python, and so on. And the idea is that these agents would send in the data or into this pipeline, into this receiving portion of this collector. But you can also configure other sources for this collector. So you can provide insights into your Azure environment and collect the data, some data from your Azure environment, from other sources, and really capture all of the information in order to then export the data at some point to an observability backend. But this also comes with this concept of this processing function where you can process the data before you export the data into some observability backend. And the purpose here is to maybe drop some data that you don't want to export or that you cannot do for various compliance reasons or security reasons. One example of that is, for example, if one of your developers enabled some debug logs and sent it into this pipeline, you can configure a rule that says any debug logs will drop directly because we don't want to send it off to some backend for costing purposes. Or maybe you captured some PII data, some user information, some credit card information, whatever it is. So you can run some rules in here as well to decorate or encrypt or hash that kind of data in order to make sure that you don't store any kind of PII data and be compliant with your environments. And then finally, ideally you want to export the data to some backend. Like I said, we have a 100% cloud native way of capturing OpenTelemetry data. We have an OpenTelemetry line protocol endpoint that you can use to send in the data. But you can, of course, use any other observability backend or even some other open source tooling, Jaeger, for example, for tracing. You have maybe already an existing solution for your logs. You can send off the logs to that environment. So you have really the choice of what and how you want to handle that data. So then the question is, oh yes, let's all run into OpenTelemetry and get started. But there are some design considerations that I encourage you to look into. And I typically like to use this analogy here where if I want to eat a cake, and I really like eating cakes a lot. So if I want to eat a cake, right, I could go to a bakery and buy a cake ready-made for me. I can look into the display and choose the cake that is of interest to me. And this is considered also the zero code or auto instrumentation because I can I cannot make much changes to the cake that is already baked, right? I don't know what ingredients went into the cake. My daughter, she's allergic to peanuts. So if I would need to check, are there any peanuts in the cake? And if so, maybe I'm not choosing that specific cake. So there's some pros and cons on using that approach. But on the other hand, if I want to make my own cake and buy all the ingredients and make sure that there's no peanuts in there, I can custom make that cake and put in all the flavors. I can design it the way I want. But it is a lot of effort, right? And this is considered manual instrumentation or custom instrumentation. And it also has pros and cons, right? It needs some more effort. You need some more, manual effort to get up and running and get started. But on the other hand, you have full control over what is happening. So if you want to, create maybe some custom telemetry, some custom traces or metrics, you can do that and you have full control, but you do have also some dependencies that you maybe putting into your application. So I'll pause. Well, one more aspect. OpenTelemetry also has great support already for a lot of libraries in .NET specifically, and that QR code will bring you into the docs that I'm sharing here. This is just a snapshot. So if you're using any libraries, any packages as part of your custom application development, you can also check out the docs already of is this custom library, is this library that you're using, that package that you're using already supporting OpenTelemetry? And if that is the case, then you have already great support built into your OpenTelemetry and visibility into your app. If it is not yet ready, you maybe have some limitations on the visibility into what you're able to see, like the depth of visibility. But maybe, if it is not implemented yet, you can also contribute, right? You can contribute to OpenTelemetry, and if, provide ways on how you can support your specific library that you're using and make sure that it is also supported with OpenTelemetry. The next section I would like to jump into like a little demo environment, but I'll pause here and see if there's any questions so far. I cannot look into the chat, so I'm not seeing any questions here since I only have like one monitor here.
Nothing in chat yet. Anybody have a question?
I was curious about the running it locally. Is that an emulator or is it Docker that you?
It basically uses Docker or containers per se, but I'll show it in a second. Yes, you can easily run it also locally with the .NET CLI command. But in general, I think the best support these days is also if you want to deploy it in a cloud environment. I think the best support is currently in containers. So there's also various ways on how you can use the AC CLI to deploy it into Azure, for example. And there's ways in how it identifies a .NET Aspire application that you have running locally, and then provides some bicep commands to deploy it into your Azure environment. But you can easily run it locally, and it will just use the .NET CLI command.
Oh, and I get it. And is it portable? The .NET Expire, like if you wanted to run it outside of Azure, or is it kind of Azure specific?
So I think it is not necessarily Azure specific. So I mean, since it is built by Microsoft, of course they have like first-class support for Azure built in. These days, I think for Azure container apps is kind of like the most native way to do it these days. But there's also a project called Aspire. Not sure how to pronounce this correctly, but Aspire, where you can convert your local environment into Kubernetes, manifests and Helm charts. And then if you have that, you could also deploy it into like an EKS cluster on AWS or some Google Kubernetes service. But you can also deploy it into any other environment. But the support for the tooling may not be available, but it is basically not focusing entirely only on the Azure environment. No.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. So let me head over into my terminal here. Let me jump over to my desktop. Here you go. So what I'm using is, and maybe you are familiar with this environment, with this sample app already. This is github.com/.net/eShop. This is what I'm using today as an example. This has been around for quite some time already. It's just a nice demo application, and there's lots of demo applications out there that focus on the similar stuff. But it's basically this retail app where you have some clients, a mobile app and the browser component. Then you have some backend services like a mobile backend for front-end section. There's a web app in the backend. There's a couple other services, like there's a database service that uses the identity provider. There's a catalog API, an ordering API basket, and so on. It uses Event Bus if you deploy it into Azure. And it also incorporates some AI into it. Of course, these days, no app without AI focus. So this is really the application that I'm using. The UI basically will look like this. We'll see this in a second, and it has some getting started guide on how to get started. What they also already baked into this is they already have .NET 10 support these days. So if you clone it directly, you will have to use .NET 10. You can also configure a different version of .NET, but you have to actively, get into the configuration for that. And it also uses Aspire, so they Aspire-ified the application already. And we look into what that actually means in a second. So this is what I cloned locally. And if I jump into my Visual Studio environment, this is the clone that I have running locally. You can see. Oh, did I stop screen sharing? Wait a second.
Or I can anyways. I don't know. Everybody else can. Oh, there we go. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry for that.
Oh, no worries.
So, I talked, but you couldn't see. So this is the GitHub repository that I was referring to. This is the sample app that I talked about earlier, where you have some, architecture diagram here. So it's basically kind of like a retail scenario that we use. This is the front end, how it looks like. And really, this is, like I mentioned already, using .NET 10 and .NET Aspire in a certain version here. So if I jump into my Visual Studio Code environment, you can see I already cloned the application locally. There's a lot of configuration here, some Aspire components and things like that. We will not have time to go into all the different aspects, but basically what it means to run an .NET Aspire application, it has two aspects that you typically would use. You'll notice, based on the architecture diagram that you have seen, there's all the different components in here. There's a basket API, a catalog, a client app. You'll have some identity API and some ordering and so on and so forth. And what it means when you, Aspirify your application, you can do that. There's also, CLI commands that you can use to, if you have your .NET application already, but it is not .NET Aspire ready yet, you can, make it Aspire ready. And typically what this means is that there will be two additional projects that you'll see. There's one, which is the app host project. This is kind of like the orchestrator that Aspire uses to define your environment and all the different services. And there's also this project called Service Defaults. And this is kind of like where you can define some default configuration. For example, let's quickly look into this. I can jump into the extensions here. So there's some defaults here for resiliency. There's some defaults for service discovery and so on and so forth. So it comes with some default configuration. It also enables by default OpenTelemetry, as you can see here. This is the defaults as the name suggests. So, but you can go in here and adjust it and make it your own and, experiment it and, if you're using different tooling, different concepts here, you can update the service defaults and make it your own. But it comes with some opinions on what it is you should be using. Like, for example, everyone is talking about OpenTelemetry, and for many, this is the standard way to capture telemetry. So they, if you're not using any APM, application performance monitoring yet, you'll have some defaults and some standards to rely on. And then the second aspect, the second project here is the app host project. And again, if we look into the configuration, this is kind of like basically your orchestrator, where you have this application builder that you can see here. And this basically defines your environment, and you can define what are all the services that you use. You'll notice that there's a Redis environment, and I can add this Redis component to my application builder. I can add some RabbitMQ to it, some database, so I can define my components of my app really nicely in this environment. And then on top of the different components that I'm using, and again, they have flexibility on the different database environments like Postgres or MS SQL and so on. You can adjust this here. And then you can basically, I'll cover this section in a second, but then you can also define your, wait a second, I am using the wrong branch here. Let me quickly jump into the different branch here. So you can also define the different components, like your own components, like the basket API. I can provide, it comes with some predefined configuration for your different services. And then basically the whole purpose of this is that you can basically define how does your application look like? Do you have any dependencies? Like for the basket API, for example, it references Redis, it references RabbitMQ, so you can build in some dependencies for your services. And then it already exposes an endpoint so that other services that also rely on this basket API can then reference also your service. So really you can define and build your application in a really nice and easy to digest fashion here. The whole purpose of this is that once you do that, you can then run a single command to spin up your entire application, this entire eShop application, with just a single command. And the command basically looks like this here, where you can say, .NET run. You define then the project that you want to, as your starting project. This is kind of like the startup project in Visual Studio. And then, I define this to be, and point it to the app host project. So exactly the one that we just looked at. And once I do that, this will come up in a couple seconds. So this will spin up the entire application with just running this single command here. If it is not built locally yet, it will build the application, and then it comes up with this setup here. And then what's also nice with .NET Aspire is that it comes with a developer dashboard. And this is the link that you'll see here for the developer dashboard. I can click into this link. And this is already, so amazing for me as a developer, because I can now see all the different services that this command spun up for me. So I can see, all the various components here. I can see my database, the Postgres database. I can see my different services like the basket, the catalog, the order processor, and so on. And I can see, all of these are running. What was the startup time? What is the source of this? You'll notice that some of them are actually running in a Docker container, like this RabbitMQ, and so on and so forth, the Postgres database. You'll notice the different endpoints that they expose. So if I want to, I can use the web application here. You'll notice that there's HTTPS and HTTP endpoint here. I can click into this link, and this will then show me the front end for my application. So this was easy to get up and running. I have this application started in a couple of minutes. including all the different components, all the way from the database and my RabbitMQ to the front end and all the different backend services that it's using. I'll pause here again and see if there's any questions so far. So this is live. I can, use this. I can, log into this environment. I'm logged in as Bob now. I can log out and do it again, log in. They have some, as part of the eShop application, they typically use these Alice or Bob as users. So I can have this username and password here and, log in, add this to the shopping cart and so on. So this is a live environment that I can use to play around with. So in my opinion, so easy to get started and get up and running. What's also nice is I can even look into some details here for all the different services. So for example, for the web app, I can click into the few details here. So the developer experience is really amazing. I can see all the different resources here, the path, is it up and running? What process ID is it using? What URLs it is exposing? What other references it uses? So the web application that I'm looking at the details right now, it uses all these different other resources as references. And also I can see some environment variables that it uses, including also the telemetry. So what you'll notice, you'll see in a second, as part of .NET Aspire, it also spins up this OpenTelemetry collector behind the scenes, which is already also running locally on my machine here. And the configuration that you'll notice here is all the different OpenTelemetry, this is short for OpenTelemetry configuration. You'll notice this OTel exporter OTLP endpoint. And if you remember the pipeline that I showed earlier with the receiver, the processor, and the exporter, this is kind of like the exporter endpoint that it is using. So the web application right now exports the data to localhost, to this localhost address, which is basically the OpenTelemetry collector that is running locally on my machine. From here, I can look into the logs for the web application. I can see all the different logs in here in this developer dashboard. If I want to, I can switch to a different service and look at its logs. And it also shows this these logs in a more structured way. So I can look at all the different logs from all the different services and how they look like. You'll notice all of the different services exposing the data into this dashboard. And it also shows the traces. So tracing is also enabled out of the box when using .NET Aspire. You'll see some traces like this here. If I want to, I can go deeper and click into any of these traces to get some further details. So this is a single trace that I executed in total. This took like 17.9 milliseconds, and how the time is spent and where it was executing some calls to some other services. You'll notice this is an example where I viewed some items in the cart, so I can see it accesses some Redis and the different services that it used to. And finally, we looked at logs, we looked at traces. Of course, also metrics are part of this. If I want to, I could look into the traces from the web application. And as you can imagine, this is a web application, so I can see all the HTTP server metrics like the active requests, the request duration, and so on. So a lot of information already that I can observe during development. If I see already some spikes or some slow execution, I can already have visibility and can act accordingly, make some adjustments to my code, make some optimizations, and really optimize my application from a performance perspective before I deploy it into a downstream environment like QA or staging, or even into prod later on. Again, I'll pause here and see if there's any questions so far. So this this developer dashboard is really already, so amazing, because I can get a lot of visibility into what is happening without spinning up, some observability tooling, without, using any backend configuration or things like that. And I get so much detail here of, using my application, and, can play around with it. All right, the disadvantages, you'll notice that, I captured a lot of traces here already while I was using the application. But once I, stop the application, of course, the access to the developer dashboard is gone. But if I then, restart the app, this should be quick because it's, built already. So I can, get this up and running again. Again, I have the link to the developer dashboard. This will rejoin my developer dashboard. But then again, all the previous traces and metrics and logs that I captured are of course gone, and I can restart again. So I have a lot of details already, but this is not, the purpose of this developer dashboard is not to have use it as a observability backend, or even for long-term storage. If you want to, it doesn't have persistent storage that it comes with. So if it has, it stores the data basically for some time, but then, once it runs out of memory, it, rotates your telemetry. And so it is not really purposed for running this long-term. If you want to have a long-term visibility into your application in your production environment, of course, you would probably not use this developer dashboard. It is really purposed for, the developer process. So one of the things that I already did here, and this is something I put into the basket API basically, and I need to find, let me quickly trigger some items into the cart. So I can now add some items into the cart here, and you'll notice the amount increases every time I hit this, right? Sometimes there's a delay. This is also on purpose. And even sometimes if I do this again, oops, I see some exception happening. But again, this is on purpose for this demo environment. So if I now go back into my developer dashboard, you'll even notice that there is, maybe I can make this a little bigger, there is a trace where you can see there was an exception happening. I could jump into this specific trace and see exactly which of the services that exception occurred. And this happened in the basket API .basket/update basket. And it couldn't find the basket here. If I want to, I can click deeper into this and look into the error and some additional details that I'm seeing here. What's also interesting is that, some of the traces, they should be pretty slow. You'll see, there's some of the traces, some are executed in milliseconds, even for the ones that where I put some items into the cart, and some were quite slow. So this one here, the first one took 5.1 seconds, and the bottom one 46 or 47 milliseconds. And of course, I can also jump into this and see, why was this specific trace slow and where it was slow. And again, it happened in the basket API in here. So I can see that this specific span, this specific part of the trace was really slow. And if I want to find out, why it was slow, I could add some additional instrumentation into it. So basically what I did here, and maybe I can quickly show you the code that I used for this. It's really, as you can imagine, I just put a sleeper in here just for demo purposes. So I can click into the Redis basket repository, and you'll notice, I have some random function here. And if I hit a certain number, I just execute I produce an exception basically. So I set the error to true. here. And if, for some other cases, I, just, add in some timer here. I simulate a delay of execution. And this is why some of them are slower than the others, just for some demo purposes. And also what's interesting here, if I go back into the dashboard, if I, select any of the spans here for the basket, there's a lot of attributes that you see that come out of the box, like the span ID, the name of the span, the kind, what method is it using? It's using gRPC to communicate. So a lot of out of the box attributes that I'm seeing here. Excuse me. But what you'll also notice is there's also a user ID here. And this is kind of like just the GUID that I'm using here. And I also captured the product ID. And so which of the products that user put into the cart. And so there's some easy ways, especially in .NET, that you can use and how to customize your instrumentation. And so what I did is, and I can quickly show you this in this example here. So in the case of .NET, what OpenTelemetry does is it uses the diagnostics system in .NET. And you can simply embed your standard system diagnostics namespace here. And then what I am able to do here is I can get the current activity. So in this case, I'm getting the current activity that is this trace is using. And I can easily add additional instrumentation here, additional information. So in this case, I'm adding in the user ID of the buyer that this application is using. And I'm also setting the product, the product ID in here. So you may be thinking, why is this even important? Well, in the case of this example, this sample app, for example, if I'm seeing a lot of exceptions that occur in the cart checkout, and I want to know what is happening, are all my users affected or are only maybe a certain set of users affected? If I see, like in the last hour, I saw 100 exceptions occurring, and this custom instrumentation, this custom information, the user ID and the product ID help me to analyze, is it all the users? Are all the 100 exceptions nicely, evenly distributed across all my user base? Or maybe is it a certain user segment that is only affected? If you imagine, you could also add the country, the origin of the user. Maybe only the people from Germany have some issue, for example. Or maybe only a certain set of products are affected, and only for certain products, it always runs into exceptions. And so having this information handy as part of your telemetry allows you then, in the case of a root cause analysis, to easily identify, does it have something to do with the actual content, the products, or is it the user base, or is it some other form of information? And this goes directly into the aspect that I mentioned earlier on the high cardinality, because you can imagine the product's ID. This example maybe has hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of products. And if I see, and I want to add for each of the different products, this product ID into the system as custom telemetry, your backend, ideally nicely supports this aspect of high cardinality when it comes to using these custom attributes. Okay, a lot of talking. I'll pause here again and see if there's any questions so far.
So how do you, so the way that you connect into this then is, I mean, obviously you have to have a New Relic account. How, I guess that's where I'm a little bit lost, is you said you were using the system diagnostics.
Yes.
Yeah, could you just go over that maybe again? I mean,
Yeah.
Maybe I missed the point on that.
Yeah,
Sorry if I'm dragging the conversation down here.
No, that's what this is for. Yeah. So in the standard configuration, or the standard eShop application, if you clone it locally, this will not be part of this, right? So And also the custom instrumentation that I used is not part of this configuration. I just added this in here to demonstrate some really nice aspects that are typically very important when it comes to observing your applications, right? And so what I did is I used this standard system.diagnostics in order to, get, some additional configuration in place. So I'm trying to get, in .NET, everything that you'll see as a trace and as a span in your observability is directly correlated to activities in .NET. So as you may know, all the the methods and the systems that you're using will be built on some activities. So for this specific method, I can get the current activity by using this standard .NET command here, right? This is nothing to do with OpenTelemetry. This is really basic .NET implementation. And then once I do that and I have the current activity, I can then do things like setting the status or setting some custom tags here on this activity. And this really allows me to, we're not talking about New Relic here at all for now, right? This is just adding some custom instrumentation to the telemetry that I'm capturing from this service. I'm not sure if that makes more sense now or whether I'm confusing you even more.
Yeah, I think so. Like I say, I was just trying to, because we'd used New Relic
Yes.
when I was at another company, and what we did was we actually the data was stored in App Insights, and then New Relic basically just became a front end to manage that. So how does to like, to be able to dive into the data, be able to see and, like, oh, how many, so basically you could use it to track the, how, where things were
Yes.
with the application and see, oh yeah, well, this is showing a lot of, this is showing a lot of problems in this particular service, or Kubernetes cluster keeps going up and keeps going and then dying and going and then restarting itself. So we could kind of, narrow it down. Then you go to App Insights to try to figure out where the actual issue was happening. So I guess I think this was pre OpenTelemetry. I don't think we're using OpenTelemetry.
Right.
So how do you connect the back end of where all of like these debug statements or whatever. Where, how does that fit in with OpenTelemetry? That's the piece that I'm missing.
Right. Yeah. Good question. So this here is basically just adding additional information to the telemetry that you're capturing, right? And as part of the New Relic agent, or if you're using App Insights, there were already similar concepts. So if I'm jumping quickly into the .NET docs for our New Relic agent, right? This also had possibilities to capture some custom attributes, right? So there was an API, or there is still an API out there where you can capture some custom attributes as part of your monitoring of your application. And again, the whole purpose is to have, some additional, when you then look at the performance of your application and look at the exceptions that occur and look at the, the application is spiking, why is it spiking and where, this additional information may help you to get to the root cause of the issue faster. This is the whole purpose of this. And again, I'll show how to connect this to New Relic or to some other observability backend in a second.
Okay.
But for now,
okay. Sorry to jump you ahead then.
No. It's a fair question. For now, I'm just using this developer dashboard to look at, it is not like a full-blown observability tool like New Relic, but it is really nice for development purposes, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And I just wanted to point out that, it is possible to customize the telemetry. And this is just one example on how I customized it, basically.
Okay.
So, but then I guess the question is, if we're using this application and we have this up and running, Ideally, what I want to do is I want to basically now adjust the configuration. I want the OTel endpoint that we are seeing here that is pointing to this local host environment. So I'm sending all the telemetry, the metrics, the traces, and the logs to my local host. I want to export them basically, in this example, to New Relic. But again, you can use any other observability backend that supports OpenTelemetry. So let's actually do that in this environment. And what I did is I actually prepared this already in a different branch. So let me check out my New Relic branch here. And so the only thing that I changed in this example here is the configuration in the app host configuration. So if I'm jumping into the app host, like again, this is the orchestrator that just is being used as the starter project that starts up all my environment locally. Again, if I jump into the program.cs, this is the place where I can then define, some different configuration. And this is what I actually did here already. So you'll notice that there's this section here for OpenTelemetry. This was not previously in the app host configuration. And so what I'm doing here is, if I'm using, of course, you can define your New Relic region. You may know that we have different regions that we run for our SaaS product. And then I can also define this OTel exporter OTLP endpoint. And what you see here is the native OTLP endpoint from New Relic that we use. So you can directly export the data to New Relic without, doing any, customization on the instrumentation itself. And if you're using the European region, this is the endpoint for the EU region that you use. And typically, in the typical way of how we do that, we also have to add a New Relic license key. And this is what I'm using here as part of this configuration. And then the typical configuration for OpenTelemetry is that you'll typically send in an API key, and the API key on the New Relic side is the license key. And this is the configuration that I'm adding in here. So this is the basic configuration. And then for each of the different services, like the identity service or the basket service that I'm using as part of the app host, I added in this configuration here. So as part of the environment variables for this basket API, I tell it to use the OTel exporter endpoint, which I defined earlier, and also the header section. And also I give it a dedicated name for this here as well. So OTel service name, these are all naming conventions from OpenTelemetry, the OTel endpoint, the headers, and the service name. These are all, standardized as well. And I can, add in the OTel endpoint from New Relic here and also the license key. And just by doing so, the data will now not flow into the developer dashboard that we have seen previously, but it will actually be directly sent into New Relic as my observability backend of choice, right? And I did that for all the different services here, like for the catalog, the ordering API. So I adjusted the configuration if I want to, and not use that configuration for all the different services. I could just remove this here, and for the ordering API, I will then not see any data in New Relic. But why would I want to do that, right? I want to see all the information in here. So this is basically what I changed in this specific version of this. And I noticed that I have one section missing here. So the application, this version of the eShop, again with the .NET command that we have seen previously. So, oops, what's happening? Oh, it's a little slow right now. No. Okay, let's do this again. Not sure why. So I'm still, again, using the .NET run command to run the application with the app host project as my startup project. this should be up and running pretty quickly. If my laptop is not dying. Something's going on in my laptop. Not sure what exactly. So, of course, I played around with this prior to this session. So let's while this is spinning up, let me jump into New Relic already. So we will still see the developer dashboard and see all the components here, like the different resources that I have up and running. But we will not see any logs or metrics or traces coming into this developer dashboard anymore. Instead, with this configuration that I just showed you, we will then see some of the configuration in here as part of New Relic entities that we can see here. And again, the same configuration could be applied to any other observability backend of your choice. So by doing that, what we typically do in New Relic is we create some entities for all the different services that you capture. And you'll notice that there is, the basket API, there's a catalog API as different entities that we see here. And this is probably, Robert, that you're familiar with. You'll probably, know this from, APM or, App Insights that you ingested into New Relic. You'll also see some entities in here. I can then jump into any of these entities. Not sure what is going on with my laptop. It is really slow. Come on. You can see it is live. It is not a canned demo or video that I'm showing here.
Demo gremlins, right?
Yeah.
Indeed.
I did quite well. Not sure what is going on here. Also, the building here is very slow. So this should already be done. Oh, I see also my battery is slow. Why is it not charging? So I do have some screenshots in the slides, but I actually would prefer to show it live. Come on. Here you go. So, what we typically do is we get experiences for all the different types of telemetry that we capture. In this case, for OpenTelemetry, we also show it in this typical fashion of showing the most important signals like the web transaction time, the throughput, the errors, and so on in in charts like these. If I then, for example, jump into the distributed tracing section, this will show a similar view like we have previously seen in the developer dashboard, but of course we show it in a slightly different fashion. Let me expand the time window here a bit, because the local environment is not up and running and it will not ingest some data. So you can see what we typically do is we typically show these trace groups prior to jumping into the dedicated traces, because I can now focus on specific types of traces that I captured. There's one for the post item. So this is when the user puts something into the cart, into the checkout section. I can jump into this specific trace group. This will now show me all the different traces in this scatter chart, so I can see which of them have been slow, what are, kind of like a timeline view of all the different traces. I can now jump into any of these single traces to get even further visibility into the single trace. With some map like this. So for this specific trace, this is kind of like a map of all the different entities that were involved in this trace. So this one here took like 5.05 seconds to execute. It included the basket API, some Redis, the catalog, and a call to the Postgres database. If I make this a little smaller and move this up here, I can then see also where's the time spent and why it was slow. I can see that, already here, this visually already shows me that, most of the time is spent in this specific span here, just from the color coding. I can then jump deeper into this and see, yes, there's some uninstrumented time. OpenTelemetry by default does not, instrument all my own custom code. So I could jump into this and customize this even further, but I can see that most of the time is spent in this update basket method from the basket API. Again, I have some additional attributes here. I can see the historical performance of this. Is it always that slow, or is it only maybe certain occasions where it is slow? And in this case, you can see in general, it was faster before, but now I see maybe some trend happening. I can also directly correlate it with the throughput. So do we see additional requests to my service? And that may be the reason why it is slow.
You
And
are
also
an
some
off-roader.
anomalies. Excuse me? Was there a question?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. And then again, we have the same or similar attributes that we've seen previously, like the name of the service, the GUI, the gRPC method, and so on and so forth. And also we of course also see the custom attributes like the product ID. This is the product ID that the user put into the cart. And I also see the user ID that I added in as custom attributes. So these are where I use the activity and the diagnostics tooling of .NET to actually send in some custom attributes like the user ID and product ID. From here, I could also jump directly into the logs, only the logs for that specific trace. So I can see, what are all the logs from all the different entities that are involved in, some execution of this specific trace. These are all the logs from all the different services that were involved, which, give me a nice view of, is there something happening here? Did I get some additional information in the logs that I can use for analysis, and so on and so forth. So what we then also typically do is, if I jump out of this quickly and look at the errors. So now I can look into, did we see any errors and exceptions occurring? And again, we typically group them by error groups. So if you see different exception types happening, we try to group them. This is grouped by internal server error 500 that we have seen. We have seen, 15 occurrences in the past 3 hours. What does it look like on the timeline? Is that a trend that is happening? Do we see any different pattern occurring, and so on? And I can then, of course, jump into more details of this exception that we are seeing, different instances of this exception, and then jump all the way down to the stack trace for this. Come on. Okay, in this case, we didn't capture a stack trace, or OpenTelemetry didn't send one. What's also interesting, and this is also one of the nice things that we provide, is kind of we also show this profiles. And this is already nice because it shows me a breakdown across all the different attributes, all the things that I'm sending in, that get sent in by default from OpenTelemetry, but also including all the custom attributes that I'm using. So in this case, I can see the category of the app, but I should also see the product ID and the user ID here, and the breakdown across these distributions here, which is really nice, because then I can see all the errors and exception maybe only coming from a different product or a different user, and I have this breakdown really available quite nice and easily for me to look into. So this is basically the instrumentation that we see by capturing the telemetry, not in the developer dashboard, but exporting it into an OpenTelemetry backend. Of course, if you're familiar with New Relic, you can also build your own custom dashboards and look at all the raw data that we capture. As you may know, there's a section in here where I can look into all of the different buckets of data that you are able to investigate. You can look into the spans, the logs, some other telemetry. And if you want to, you can put, or create your own custom dashboard. This is what I did for this eShop application as well, which will show me, some other information that we are user. So maybe this is going into the area of like more business observability, where I can use the same telemetry that I capture from a technical perspective, but also focusing on some business observability. I can see what are the most favorite products that are being used, and a breakdown from a percentage perspective. I can see where on a timeline have these product IDs been used in the cart. That they go into like a checkout. I can provide like a funnel, how many cart, and how many have actually been sold then and checked out. I can see the different users, how many successful users have we seen, how many with errors. So a lot of different additional ways on how to use the same telemetry, but focus on different aspects, and focus on some other unique things that you can look into. And of course, from here you can also set up alerts and notification. If you see any patterns occurring, some outliers detection that we automatically do, and use that data in some other shapes or forms, and get notified via email or Slack or Teams, and see some issues whenever they occur. So you don't need to look into a dashboard like this all time. You get automated alerting when you set up some alert notifications here. Again, I'll pause here and see if there are any questions from what I showed so far.
No, doesn't look like it. Thank you.
Perfect. So let me jump back into the slides. So I hope I was able to show you what, really the benefit of .NET Aspire is, especially when it comes to orchestrating like a lot of different services, having different components in place. Like, you saw in the example of the eShop application, Redis and RabbitMQ and Postgres that I can use, and the app host project really being the source of the orchestration. I can define how the dependencies look like in my application. I then showed you how you can use the developer dashboard, which is really nice to for me as a developer to get started and looking at some observability. As I mentioned as well, .NET Aspire comes with a lot of opinionated ways on what it is you should be focusing if you're not using OpenTelemetry yet. .NET Aspire helps you get up and running really quickly because it comes with some predefined configuration already. So it uses OpenTelemetry by default. You can then configure this. You can use it in the developer dashboard, but you can also export it into an OpenTelemetry endpoint, an OpenTelemetry backend like New Relic, because that is really nice because it adds some historical capabilities into capturing the telemetry for long-term storage, and also of course some alerting and production readiness. If you use the developer dashboard, of course it isn't persistent, so you want to scale this in a nice fashion using an observability backend. I showed you, some connected experiences in the Relic and what we typically do by showing this data in a nice fashion, building some custom dashboards, like for example, the distribution of products. Just by using the custom attributes, the tags that I used in the activity configuration in my app, I was able then to also show up a dashboard like this, which focuses on some visibility into what are the products being used and how many users have we seen and so on and so forth. So really nice to also leverage custom events and custom attributes when it comes to OpenTelemetry, especially also when using this Aspire. This is the example that I used where we've seen some distribution of products, the favorite products that we used. I have some additional resources for you, links into .NET Aspire if you want to learn more about it, using telemetry in .NET Aspire specifically, and of course also some links into OpenTelemetry capabilities from New Relic. If you want to learn more, you can always reach out to me. If you have any follow-up questions or need further information, please get in touch. You'll probably find me on various social media platforms. And that is what I wanted to share with you today. I hope it was interesting. Like I mentioned, whatever I share today is applicable to all OpenTelemetry tooling that is out there. This is purely using OpenTelemetry, the open standard. I hope it was interesting. If there are any final questions, I'm happy to take them. Here's a link to my social media environment. So please get in touch if you need any additional information and have additional questions. That was all I had to share. Thank you for listening, and I see if there's any follow-up or final questions.
Okay. Anyone have any
This
questions?
is great, man. Oh, this is this is awesome. And I know like I say, we used New Relic before, and what was it, Sensitech, and it was, I mean, we had hundreds of endpoints and trying to hunt down across like loosely coupled kind of stuff. I mean, it was invaluable, so it wasn't open. I know we weren't using OpenTelemetry because it wasn't available that, but
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is a different approach, right? I mean, but it is an open standard. And in my opinion, at some point, I guess all the proprietary agents will disappear. As of today, they are probably not on par with like the vendor-specific agents. They come with some additional, capabilities and features, but it is just a matter of time, in my opinion, right? OpenTelemetry will be the future of, capturing telemetry from various sources. And it's just good to get started on this, experimenting, and seeing what visibility do you get when using OpenTelemetry.
Well, I like
And
the
you can still,
Aspire way too. Like you got like kind of a starting point for your enterprise and kind of
yes.
getting, you know, a nice dashboard like that. It's just that's huge, you know, so
Yes.
that's pretty cool.
Oh. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you, Harry. Really appreciate it and being with us tonight and giving us some of your insights and experience with working with these tools. It's been fantastic to see these demos. And I agree, this is really cool. Some of the things that are available and taking us into the future, and open telemetry, I agree. I think is the future. So yeah, great to see. Thank you again, and appreciate everyone joining tonight. We'll go ahead and stop our video.
Yeah, thank